Hey y'all, I'm Rylan. Welcome to my channel. This is probably going to be my very last video filmed in this apartment, which is very bittersweet. As you can see behind me, the background is very different, very sparse, because I am about to officially be moved into my fiance's house because we somehow get married in 3 weeks from the time that I'm filming this video, which is pretty insane. And I wanted to sit down for a second and film one more video in here before I am officially gone from this place. So bittersweet, so excited for what's coming next, but also have a lot of really fond memories with my books and just my very cozy space in this room, and it's a little bit sad to be leaving it. But today I want to take a few minutes to answer the questions to the audiobook era tag. This is a new original tag that was created by Jess over at Honest Fiction. I will have her channel linked in the description down below if you want to go watch her video answering these questions as well. I personally love a good book tag. Nobody tagged me to do this, but I saw somebody do it and I wanted to join in on the fun. So today I'm going to be answering 11 questions about my audiobook habits and personal enjoyments, as well as tagging a couple friends at the very end. The first question for this tag is, what was the first audiobook you ever listened to? I am 95% sure that the first audiobook that I ever tried to listen to was back in 2020 when I tried to read Witches Steeped in Gold. This was a young adult release that came out during COVID and I was super excited for it. I actually ended up DNFing this book, unfortunately, partially because of the audio, I believe. Also, I just wasn't in the headspace for this book at the time, but this was my first foray into audiobooks. I do not think that it was my preferred reading format at the time that I tried to listen to this book, but it was kind of my first dive into audiobooks, and now here we are, where I would say that 75 to 80% of my reading is done via audiobook in some capacity, which is pretty crazy. Question number 2 is, who are your favorite narrators? I actually do not have an answer to this question. I am not somebody who pays attention to narrators, I guess. When I listen to an audiobook, I tend to be able to separate the voices from the plot, if that makes sense. And I very much listen to audiobooks so that I can concentrate on doing other things while getting in some reading done. So I'm never sitting still while I'm listening to an audiobook. I'm always moving around, doing other things. So I guess I have not necessarily paid attention to audiobook narrators, although I have heard great things about so many of these narrators who narrate the very popular books. And I do very much enjoy supporting them through listening to their works and buying their audiobooks occasionally. Question number 3 is, what audiobook platforms do you use? I tend to use Hoopla. My library back home in my parents' town has the best selection that I could have ever imagined, even better than my Nashville selection for Hoopla, so I always take advantage of my library back home. And then I also use Spotify a lot for audiobooks now until I run out of hours for the month, and then I go back to Hoopla. So those are my 2 main ones. I use Audible very rarely nowadays, but do sometimes buy my books through there as well if it's something that I really want on audio, but I don't have it available on Spotify or Hoopla for whatever reason. So those are my 3 main ones. Question number 4 is, what book did you love on audio that you might not have liked if you read physically? I have to say most fantasy books I enjoy because I listen to them on audio. They can be confusing at times, but books like The Courting of Bristol Keats, Fourth Wing, ACOTAR, I read all of those on audio, and I think part of the reason that I enjoyed them so much is because I have the audiobook listening experience as well as the physical book in front of me. I do feel like for myself personally, having those multiple formats can help, especially with the fantasy books. So I do feel like a lot of fantasy I've ended up really liking that I might not have if I had just read it physically, because I was able to listen a lot faster than I would have been able to read physically and just kind of dive into that atmosphere a touch more. Question number 5 is, what is your go-to audiobook speed? I will listen to an audiobook at anywhere from 1.75 times speed to 2.2 or 2.3 times speed. It depends on how into the book I get, the genre, the narrator, and how well I am following the book. Next question is, do you prefer single or dual/multi-narration? I'm someone who will always say prefers dual/multi-narration. I love getting all the perspectives, all the worldviews, all the POVs, and I do feel like dual or multi-narrators do add to that element of perspective and who you're following, but I will also never complain about reading multiple characters from a singular narrator. I honestly have no issues with both, but when it comes to perspectives and POVs in general, I do tend to prefer multiple. Question number 7. Do you listen while multitasking, or do you just sit and listen to the audiobook like it is a movie? Again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm somebody who pretty much has to be doing something while listening to an audiobook. For some reason, I feel as though I engage better. If I'm sitting still listening to an audiobook, I feel like I get bored faster or I lose my focus. But if I'm moving around and staying engaged in something physical with my hands or like with my body and doing things, I, for some reason, feel like I can better listen to the audiobooks and I fly through them a lot faster. Question number 8 is, what is your biggest audiobook pet peeve? For me, that has to be when I can hear the recording stop in the middle of a scene. I don't hear this happen often, but there are some books where I can almost hear very small but very audible clicks or like pauses, and I can tell that like there was a pause in the middle of the scene, and that kind of throws me out of the story sometimes. I don't know why it bothers me so much, but that's probably my biggest pet peeve. Question number 9 is, if you could have any book made into an audiobook, what would you pick? And I have to say that most of the books that I do read have audiobooks with them that I can find via my library or purchasing them. But one book that I loved last year that I do not see or do not know of an audiobook for would be When the Fake Snow Falls by Heather Garvin. This is a holiday romance. It was so much fun, a 2024 favorite of mine. There's no audiobook for this one currently, and I would love to see it produced as one. Question number 10 is, what is your all-time favorite audiobook experience? My answer for this question is probably super duper basic, and that is okay. Don't come at me. I listened to this book years ago, but it was probably Verity by Colleen Hoover. I reread this book like 3 years ago on audio, and the entire time I felt like I was on the edge of my seat. I was gasping even though I already knew what happened in this book, and I just thought that the audiobook was so well done, so engaging, and I am pretty sure I listened to the whole thing in one go while I was just doing stuff around my apartment, and I was very much hooked on it. The 11th and final question for this tag is, have you ever listened to an audiobook that made you stop and say, wait, what did I just hear? I cannot pick out a specific audiobook where I have thought of this, but there are 2 genres that tend to make me generally think things like that. The one is fantasy. Sometimes this question, like the wait, what did I just hear, comes in a more confusing way if there's a lot going on, a lot of world building, or I'm just kind of lost to the story for a little while. I can ask myself that question, have to go back and listen again. For thrillers, I might ask myself, wait, what did I just hear, in a more positive way in terms of like the plot twists or just something shocking that happens in a way that makes me react similarly. And so I do tend to have reactions to audiobooks. Those are the 2 main genres that I tend to have this specific reaction though, where I kind of ask myself or pause and I say, wait, what did I just listen to? The last part of this tag is to, of course, tag some friends. So I'll be tagging 2 of my book besties, Aylin from In My Reading Era and Stasia from Reader C. If y'all have time to do this tag, please feel free to do so. I would love to see y'all's answers to these questions. I know that Aylin does listen to a lot of audiobooks. Stasia maybe not so much, but I would be curious to hear your answers to these questions anyway, since I do know that you find some good ones occasionally. Those are my answers to this audiobook era book tag. I am somebody who listens to almost all of my books on audio. Even if I have the physical book, if I have access to the audiobook, I would most likely going to download it. I engage better with my reading in multiple formats. I feel like I'm able to be productive when I have an audiobook going in my ears, and I'm just somebody who really engages with stories via audio. So I do very much appreciate having access to this format of reading and try to take advantage of it when I can. But that is all that I have for today's video. If I did not tag you and you're interested in filming your responses to this tag, feel free to do so. Make sure to tag me so I can watch your responses. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.